Now, what did you think, if I can ask, what did you think about the brain mapping as as a diagnostic tool? Because you're a research scientist.
Well, I'm a researcher, but I'm nowhere near. I'm an epidemiologist, so my research is very far afield. I know more about viruses and bacteria and the like than the brain. But my husband does know about it, and he says that there's actually growing evidence that's starting to catch up to where Dr. Swingle is now, and it's becoming more talked about and more respected.
Well, that's the problem. You can understand, I don't know if you were listening at the start or watching, but I started off this whole thing by saying that on air, that when Paul first told me he cured ADD, I was a bigger skeptic than you were, because even though it wasn't, I didn't think it was a factor in my family. It turned out to be a factor. But I just finished one of my better friends, Shirley Stalker, who's the president of the CKNW Orphans Fund and produces the telethons then for Variety Club and so on. Shirley had just finished doing a 2-hour documentary on ADD and the causes and cure or whatever, and there were no cures. There wasn't. All that anybody was doing was teaching people how to deal with it in the family and drugging them to make them more amenable so they got along with the teachers type of thing. And he said he cured ADD, and he has the honor of being the only person out of about, I don't know, 3,000 people I've interviewed in my last 57 years that I ever checked. And you have felt that way a little bit too, right? I know, have we lost her?
No, I'm
you're
still
there?
here. I'm just having a hard time hearing it.
Oh, I'm sorry. I should have talked
louder.
louder.
Quiet. We're actually still seeing Dr. Rhodes. I think that in cases that are complex like my son's, where you have a history of sexual abuse and then you have ADHD and you have problem behaviors that have gone on and been missed for quite some time, like bedwetting, lack of impulse control, things like that. It's like, as Dr. Swingle has told me when we first met, peeling off the layers of an onion. And sometimes when you focus on one area of the brain, it can have an impact like a domino effect on other parts of the brain. And I've started to see that with Cameron. So I think that you can't just go and have one session and expect a miracle. You have to be patient and realize that the brain is an organ, and invest the time and the energy and to provide all the supportive things around the family member who's getting the therapy in order to make it a lasting change.
Stephanie, thank you. Have anything to say, Paul? I have brought you over to interview you, and you haven't got a chance to say much.
Yeah, this is wonderful. I'm just sitting here listening. You can interview me anytime.
Yeah. I know you've got friends coming over, and I really want to thank you.
Thanks for sharing that.
Well, I want to
really
thank you, too, and I think that for anybody who's listening or reading the transcript on the web, whether it's now or years from now, I think it's important to realize that sometimes with individuals, a marginal change is all we need to make a difference in terms of whether or not they're going to be successful in society. And diversity is something that I think the world has to come to terms with. We have this very narrow range of what we consider normal. And I think that as more attention is given to issues like Asperger's and ADHD, et cetera, I think that we are making the world a more tolerant place.
Well, we're learning more about it, and if I can use my own experience, when you can look at a brain map and say, if this goes, what happened with me, and I think I told you at the time, I'm going to repeat it again, because if you didn't see it before, I'll say it again. I went down to Paul Swingle's place because I'd had him as a guest on my program 3 times at that point, and he phoned me a couple of days before Christmas and said, his wife Rosemary, who now has an art gallery in town, and Mitchell, who's my son, who's operating the cameras and stuff right now, Mitchell is working at that art gallery, Barron's Art Gallery down in Columbia and Powell, in Cordova there, 1 day a week. But another son I have had just failed all his Christmas exams. And I went down, and Paul said, Rosemary thought maybe you'd like to have your head examined. So I went down, and they scraped all my head because it's bald, and you can't, those things that they use to read your head, They put 19 things on my scalp, and he did this brain map and printed it all out. And there's a lot of stuff else to be around it. And then he's reading it, and he said, well, if it did this here, it would mean you're an addictive personality. If you did this, you'd have this kind of ADD. And if it did this, he's going down all these squiggles, which is sort of like looking at a V12 engine scope. And then my son, Peter, piped up, and who's failed every academic class, but is a brilliant young lad. He piped up and said, would you do me too? And Paul, and I'm getting emotional myself right now, Paul turned to his daughter Mary and he said, can you stay a while? Because she had a date or something she was trying to get. This is Boxing Day. I mean, this is a holiday. Mm-hmm. And I should thank Mari, not you. Anyway, she stayed and she did Peter's brain scan while I went in with Paul, showed me all his machinery. And when we finished, Mari sort of hands us, and he's a poker face, but he won't talk about anybody. Mari sort of handed it to him, and she's not as good a poker face. I could tell that she had a concern about this thing, and Paul looks at it and he says, David, can I talk to Peter? And I said, sure. He looks at Peter and he says, Peter, when you're reading a paragraph, when you get to the bottom of the page, you don't remember the paragraph, right? And Peter's eyes went, yeah. And then he said, and Peter, when you're answering a question, when you finish reading the question and go to answer it, you can't remember the question. And Peter's face lit up like it was 4th of July. Finally, somebody understood him.
Well, it was better than a psychic, let me tell you,
yeah,
when I listened to Paul talk about how my son's brain was.
Yeah.
So I'll have to sign up one of these days, too. But with that, I'm going to sign off, and I want to thank you both for the time and the energy that you've invested in people that really just need to be given a bit of a chance in life.
Well, the problem is that the school should have stuff like Paul's systems in school, and they should be doing a literal physical diagnosis that can be done, and you can tell what it is, rather than a bunch of people's opinions.
Well, thank you to you both. I'm just going to sign off.
Thank you so much, Steph.
Thanks very much.
Well, you can't get more. So the audience, if there's anybody watching and you would like to phone and ask Paul Swingle a question, the lines are open whether you're in San Diego or Sarasota, Florida, or Whitehorse in the Yukon. You can give us a call at area code 866-980-0499. So if you're somebody out there with a child with a closed head injury or ADD or ADHD or Asperger's, tonight is the time to phone and talk to Paul from anywhere in the world. It's your call. If you happen to be in Vancouver, tomorrow night, and the reason we're doing the program tonight, Paul is doing an open lecture at the Vancouver Public Library, 7 p.m. in the Alice McKay room, which is on the lower level. And I'm going to make a comment to you. If you live in Campbell River, or you live in Victoria, you live in Calgary, get on an airplane and fly and take a look at the lecture. Because it is good. And apparently we have a call right now, so we'll put you on in a second. 1-866-980-0499. Now, if you got a tax question, you got to phone that after 7 o'clock. Tax, immigration, any of that stuff, after 7 o'clock. Richard Pitt and I are going to talk about the Hancock Wildlife Foundation, and we're going to answer tax questions and stuff. Richard's got something to talk about. And so who do we have here? Hello, go ahead.
Hello.
Yes? Hello?
Hello.
Yes, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can barely hear you.
Okay.
I'm going to have to put you on mute so I can hear to ask the question.
Okay. What is it, ma'am?
Well, it's actually regarding my husband. And I don't know, like, I'd like to know where this doctor is. So
Vancouver.
That we can contact with him. And is this similar to, Dr. Amen?
Yes.
Is that a similar kind of treatment that he does?
Dr. Amen uses a scan to look at the structure of the brain, and then he typically uses some sort of medication to try to correct that condition.
Right.
What we do is a functional assessment of the brain, electroencephalograph, and we use self-regulatory procedures, brainwave biofeedback, brain driving, and so forth to normalize brain function. So we're not relying on any pharmaceutical to create a condition of improving brain functioning.